Welcome, I am Eleftheria Pagalou. These conversations explore psychology, perception, coherence, consciousness, and the hidden structures shaping human experience. Hello, everyone. So these days I was channeling on several topics with Jules, and I was wondering which podcast it would be in line with what I was channeling and the timing of it. So I would like to talk about perception and the reason why I want to talk about perception, human perception, is because it is the stepping stone on how we experience the world around us. So let's do it. You have many times heard people saying, oh, I perceived what happened this way, or people saying like, what happened is this and that. So when they say what happened, actually it's the translation of their perception. It is very difficult to distinguish between facts and perception. So let's dive into it. Why is it perception defining the way we perceive reality? Because what we see, we have emphasized culturally and globally a lot our mental faculty. So my starting point, the base of this conversation, is that perception relates to our cognition and relates to our mental body. And upon incarnation, we are born into very intense mental structures. They are ready made. They are there, they're standing. We come into a world where is structured upon specific beliefs, ideas, and we are exposed to these ideas of how this world is, how it operates, and how we are supposed to be. Therefore, with our arrival, we start being exposed to specific cognitive structures. If you ask me, are they pre-made, constructed? My response is yes, they are. Upon generations to generations, there's been transmission of specific patterns that they're being reproduced. And as we add to the system and more people participate in specific thought forms and beliefs, they become concrete constellations. And I call them constellations because many thoughts together and beliefs and ideas come together to form a network. And this network I call constellation. Constellation of different ideas, thought forms, and constructions that shape the way we see the world. And a practical example will be, how do you perceive a person who, let's take an example, somebody walks into a coffee shop and there is a company there, some people gathered that you know, and you walk in and you don't even say, you might say hi and go and sit on a different table. Now, if you're in a culture where people gather all together on a table and they share, and you do it in this context, they might say, what is wrong? What is wrong with him? Why is he not coming to us? Why did he go and sit elsewhere? Now, if you are in a different context, a bigger city, and you see somebody, you might say hi and go and sit somewhere else, and that would be the norm. You say hi to somebody you know, and then you just go on with your business. Perhaps you would expect somebody to invite you into the table rather than thinking that I have to do it because I'm expected to do so. So different cultures, different environments create different conditions. And according to these conditions and cognitions, what we have in our mind, we judge the character of another person. We might call them weirdos, antisocial, rude. And that was a very simplistic example, but the point of this conversation is taking something which might be a bit more complex and make it a bit simpler in that you can incorporate it in your daily life, and perhaps by realizing the importance of your cognition and your perception, you can start or becoming the observer and stop identifying so much with what you're seeing, and that will shift your behavior. But we will get there. Stay with me. So, the difference between an adult and a child, there are many differences, but in relation to our conversation here, the child comes and is open. It's open to interpretations and to different experiences. It doesn't come with judgment. The adult has many beliefs in place that shape his or her perception and watches around and judges the environment. And judgment doesn't mean discernment. We see something and we automatically think, oh, this is what happened and this is what this means. And sometimes this is automatic. And what we see is an automatic response of what we have in our head, which doesn't mean, it doesn't equate with a fact or something that is true. It comes through our own interpretation. And most people lose the sensitivity to understand when that happens. Either they don't know because they never questioned their perception, or they never did some work relating to questioning their perception. Or they live in an environment that things are so set that they haven't gone above. And then there are some others that just don't question the reality as much because they think whatever they see and how they interpret is a fact. And a fact that is a fact is beyond question, and there's nothing to discuss about. Like, it is what it is, and this is it. What are we going to talk about? So here comes also rigidity, because if your perception is something and you're taking in the information as a factual, then you don't question and you become rigid. So you're not so open to other people's interpretation. Now, the conversation started by saying that perception is overemphasized. It's our mental body is very loaded. It's the center of our attention and of our training, because one of the skills an individual must have is the capacity to carry mental constructs, be intelligent, have good communication skills, have knowledge, and all these are falling into the mental body, our mental faculty. So, in relation to other bodies, for example, our physical body or our emotional body, our mental body is overwhelmingly developed. Well, is that a problem? I was going to say, you tell me. If we come here and we have different bodies, which means different, we have the capacity to experience realities through different senses, and we're using basically our mental construction to interpret the world around us, it becomes a problem, because then our cognition is taking over and our perception in itself, I need to be careful here how I say that, our perception in itself, in isolation from our other bodies and the other senses, whether they are lower senses or are higher senses, which could be telepathy and emotional frequencies, what we pick up emotionally. So if our mental cognition, which relates to our logic, and people use a lot the phrase logically thinking. What does your logic say? Let's develop your logic. Logic in isolation does not use emotions, does not use feelings, does not use physical sensations, and spiritual information coming through. You're requested to think logically, and everybody says that, and everybody means something else. Our logic can be linear or more non-linear, depending on the frequency we are transmitting and how developed our different bodies are and how aligned they are with each other. So, is then perception just the mental body, or our perception is shaped also by our other faculties? So the answer is not very simple, because perception belongs to the mental sphere, and yet if you have questions, the thoughts you're having, the beliefs, the structure you have in your head, the constellations I mentioned, if you have questioned them and you have done some work with the mental sphere, then inevitably different parts of your being, different parts of you, different bodies of yourself come to meet with your mental sphere. So therefore there's something there that is called information exchange between them. So at this stage, perception is not just the mental sphere, it's the mental sphere being affected also by different forms, different faculties, our different faculties. our perceptions start receiving information from our emotional body, our energy body, our spiritual body, and physical body. And it becomes a huge faculty that doesn't depend just on the mental level. So, is that easy? Well, we are supposed, as individuals, living in a world that demands we are resilient, to have developed our different faculties. But for centuries, the pressure and the demand fell on mental development. And this is great, but we need to be able, at this stage where we are, to investigate or research or observe if that was healthy and where we stand right now as humanity. So, if we want to, if we start by saying perception shapes our reality, the implications are huge, massive. And in one of the channelings, I started questioning, and me and Jules, I mean, we talked a lot about it. I started questioning whether poverty and abundance can coexist. And that led to a very big discussion in terms of how people perceive things. Is it that poverty and abundance live next to each other in the same reality? Or they are different frequencies coexisting and transmitting to different frequencies, which means we have an overlap between different realities and even timelines, because poverty and abundance don't belong to the same frequency, the same timeline, the same level of consciousness. And by itself, that means that you may be seeing poverty and abundance standing next to each other in the physical world, but that can only happen because two timelines cross. How do you know that poverty and abundance, you may ask me, don't belong to the same frequency? The experience of being poor and the experience of being rich is very different. And I need to correct something here. When I say abundance, I don't mean financial prosperity. I mean experiencing life as an abundant vessel, and rather than feeling restricted, limited, experiencing poverty, austerity, which is the opposite. So, two individuals that experience these two different parts of supposedly of a continuum have a completely different experience, and their translation and interpretation of the world through their perception is completely different. The facts that will come from a person that experiences abundance will be completely different from the perception and the interpretation of the reality of the person that experiences austerity, limitation, and poverty. The one struggles for survival, and the other one starts from a point where the basic needs at least are covered, and he or she can think about expanding, creating more, having more, doing things that make the person feel more abundant or experience joy, whilst the other person is struggling to make it on a day-to-day basis and experiences life as being tortured or be in pain. So growth for the one person might be you need to have a hard time to grow because life is painful and it has to be hard if you want to be successful. The other one might tell you that life can be similar. We have access to things, there is abundance, and you don't have to struggle. So somebody looking from the outside, the one will judge most likely each other, and somebody from the outside will say, well, yeah, you know, you don't know how it is to be poor. And the other one will say, well, you don't know how it is to be abundant. And they are talking the same language, but they cannot meet because they're talking about different things, and they cannot find the words to actually explain what they mean and where they're coming from. Perception, and independently of whether we connect it a lot with our other bodies or we contain it within the mental faculty, the mental field, is informed by different levels of consciousness. And different levels of consciousness have a different perception. The glasses they're wearing to see and observe reality are completely different. And it's really interesting because you will hear this information, and my hope is you will expand your horizon and you will take a moment to think, wait a minute, if this is the case, then everything around is not what it seems to be. I promise you, at the beginning, it might be a bit difficult to grasp or confusing, but eventually, clarity that comes in through this understanding, this knowledge, makes you feel more hopeful in that humanity has the chance to do things in a different way. So back to perception and levels of consciousness. This is a big part of the architecture I'm building and the subjects to be analyzed. If you come from a level of consciousness that is low, and that doesn't mean you're a bad person or you don't have the right morals or a right internal compass. It means that whatever your experience is and the facts you hold for your reality, they are tied to lower consciousness. And when you come from this lower consciousness, your understanding is limited in that you might be looking on subjects, you might be very rigid in how you translate and interpret the world around you, because there are serious limitations in what you perceive. And if you are in a higher level of consciousness, by definition, you can see broader and you can understand more of things. Therefore, your perception can interpret things from a higher perspective and can be more flexible because of that. I will say something here because finding the words to explain this stuff might it's really important for me that I don't minimize anything, and I don't want you to give the feeling like, oh, I experienced that, therefore I'm coming from a lower consciousness and this is bad. No, I don't speak in these terms. Here we are talking about how individuals experience the reality in different ways, and if you understand the difference, you have the choice, you will have the chance to do something about your reality, to shift your reality. This is why this topic is so important. It's not a topic where I'm trying to categorize people according to their experience and their interpretations. My purpose here is to open up your field, your perspectives, and help you expand your life and improve your life. So it might be very important for you to know that the information I received in the channeling a few days ago and yesterday was that we come into incarnation with serious limitations. We bring them from different lifetimes, or we bring different energies and frequencies in that are very limiting. And the way to break through these limitations is through the training and exposure and experiences we gather in this lifetime. Therefore, and I want you to understand that I'm not judging who's limited and who's not, and who's better and who's not, because we come into this world with limitations, and there are ways to work with them, overcome them, and expand. And by doing so, coming closer to our potential, coming closer to our life purpose and closer to our soul. This is why this conversation is also very important, because it gives us a different perspective. So it brings comfort. It brings comfort that it is important to know that we come in here and we are exposed to environments that are limited, but we also come with specific limitations. And the information that says that we can lift these limitations and therefore shift our reality and our perception means through the training we receive throughout our life. And it could be even the university studying exposes us to ways of thinking, teaches us to question things, to research, to put the effort to understand more than we can. So, and in this way, expanding. So, training here is sometimes is decoding, unlearning, and then learning. Unlearning could be either with an external provocation or a trigger that, oh my God, what happened? I feel limited in what I'm thinking. Why am I seeing other people doing this here if you're in an environment that is outside your comfort zone? Because in this moment, you need to question yourself. Is this what I know true? Or actually what I know is true and I keep it, and I'm just in a different field than the environment I'm in right now. So you learn to question, and by doing so, you're expanding. You're asking, is this construct, is this cognition I have right now mine? Or it's already coming ready-made from the environment and I never questioned it. So through training, we learn and then we unlearn to then learn again. And an example would be, you might spend years and years of your life, that could be different for each one of us, training your mind and developing your mental capacities, creating new mental networks, neurons coming together to create bigger constellations of thoughts and beliefs, and creating the worldview in your head. You're building this very strongly, and then at some point in your life, you can realize that this is as well very limited. So it is expanded in relation to the previous state of yourself, but in relation to where you are right now, currently in your life, is no longer expansion. It's actually very limiting. So then you start questioning and thinking, okay, this is limiting. What is wrong? I feel things. Something is wrong lately. I start to feel differently. Why? Now, I'll give you two options here, and there are many more, but just for you to understand. It might be that there is a calling for you to start developing the other faculties you have that you weren't paying attention to, and they're screaming for your attention because they want to come into the game. They say, forget your head. What does your head know? Why do you trust whatever your mind is telling you? So they're just screaming, and you start feeling really uncomfortable because you might be feeling one thing, but then your head tells you another thing. The second part, for the sake of this conversation in development, is what has changed is the world around you. The world around us is never the same, even if we live in the same house, in the same place, in the same community, and even when we have similar people around. The environment is on a continuous transformation. The energies changes, the fact changes, the world around us changes. Therefore, we cannot remain, and I'm not talking about our core, about the essence, but the outside and our cognition that I'm talking about today cannot remain the same, because evolution comes when we move, and it doesn't mean that we follow exactly the outside developments, but it does mean that we evolve. And evolution here doesn't simply mean change. It means coming closer to your potential, to your divine blueprint, what you were born to become in this lifetime. So evolution here means approaching, and it doesn't mean you need to be stressed all the time, like, am I approaching? No, but evolution means taking this direction that brings you closer to who you truly are. Well, is it evolution if you change, but, for example, instead of moving closer to your soul level, you become more of your personality, which is the human side of yourself? Yes, that can be evolution. That would make you adjusting the environment and the calling you had, like, for example, if you're found in an environment that judges you and requests that you evolve as a personality, and personality here means a lot of your ego, which are the survival instincts and survival mechanisms. So if you're in an environment that is calling you to survive, you will use these techniques and defense mechanisms to survive. Now, even then, it's questionable whether we survive because we're just following our ego, because the ego is very limited in itself, although the purpose is to protect us. And this is a deep and a big subject as well. But the question is, it's very questionable, I said, whether it's just the ego operating to our survival, and whether higher faculties don't come into play to guide us and avoid dangers. Like, an example is our intuition and inner knowing that we need to be taking a specific direction without knowing logically why. So there is a higher intelligence that come into play into our survival. And actually our evolution, because this is an evolutionary independently of what's happening and what you experience within your level of consciousness, you're striving for evolution. And evolution and higher intelligence, when it comes into play, makes you not just a survival being. Doesn't make you a survivor, I'm sorry. It makes you resilient. There are many subjects that you're listening now, and I'm just thinking, oh, this comes into play as well, because they are all interconnected. And here I'm trying to stay on one subject, which is perception, and I keep on adding parts that come into play as well, together with perception. And it's important to know that it's very complicated, but at the same time, this discussion is meant to give you a different perspective, and perhaps a tool. The tool is questioning what you see and becoming the observer in any situation. So if you are rushing into interpreting something that comes into your perception, rather than treating it as a fact, you become the observer, which means you're studying a bit, you're zooming out, and you're questioning, okay, is this a fact, or is this my perception telling me that this is a fact? Why do I think this is a fact? Would it be a fact for the person opposite me? So, this is a starting point, yes, and by doing so, you're allowing a different level of consciousness to show up into your field just by questioning. It doesn't mean that you become the doubter, you're questioning everything, but it can function as a portal for a higher level of consciousness to come in. So you may borrow the glasses of another level of consciousness to see a different perspective that may add to your current perception and create a shift. So I will close this. I will close this conversation. And the different parts that I mentioned, and they need to be explored in different episodes as they become branches that add or expand to the same topic and to different topics as well. They're bridges. So for today's episode, I just wanted to tell you about perception, how it shapes reality, and how different levels of consciousness hold a different perception, and therefore they interpret the environment in a different way, and shaping our reality. I hope my episode finds you well and help you understand something, or add to or resolve something in you, or even created a bit more curiosity, because this is very important. We need to be curious, to explore, not for the sake of knowledge in itself, but for the sake of understanding, and therefore shifting and co-creating our reality and shaping our environment. I'll see you soon.